Hello and welcome back. Week 17 top performers. You're looking at Artemi Panarin, the Breadman. 4 goals, 5 assists, 9 points last week. I guess he liked that Tarasenko trade. But that's a lesson as we approach the deadline. Sometimes the best value you can get in fantasy is not the player getting traded. It's somebody who plays with him. Think of Barzal with Horvat. Think of Panarin with the Tarasenko deal. Who will that be with the impending Chychrun deal? The deal hasn't gone down yet. We don't know, but when it does happen, you can stay tuned to the channel. I'll cover that in depth. In the meantime, though, who are the top performers from last week? So these are the top 3 forwards, 2D, 1 goalie who lit it up last week. And as always, they have to be under 50% owned. We also have a bonus at the end. If you look at the top risers on the Data Draft Player Hub, there are some interesting stories, and we'll get to that at the end of the video. But before that, let's start up front. And the number 1 forward this week was Ondrej Palat. I mentioned him in the weekly video. I did a fantasy file short on him on Saturday. He's still really ownable at 30%. He is a single position left winger, which does hurt his positional flexibility a little bit. 2 goals, 3 assists, 2 power play points, 4 shots, 7 hits, and 6 blocks on the week. So in addition to 5 points in 3 games, he also covers hits and blocks really well. And that's what I was mentioning in the weekly video and on the player short, on the YouTube short fantasy file, because he's basically a hits and blocks forward. So on the channel, I've been mentioning a lot about a hits and blocks defenseman. But if you're looking for those category coverages in a forward who's going to get you some offensive production, Ondrej Palat is the guy to go to, especially with this ownership level. So if you look at his player hub, 88th percentile in goal production. He's on a 26 goal pace right now. 87th in hits production, 2.21 per game, and over 1 block per game. So every game you're getting at least 2 hits, 1 block, and a couple of points if he's on fire, which he is right now. 3-game point streak, an assist, 2 assists both on the power play, and a 2-goal game against Vancouver. So he's been increasing his role as he gets healthier, returning from injury. The only thing that's dragging him down is the injury to Jack Hughes, but he's still playing with Jesper Bratt and Nico Hischier, which does help. He's still going to get the top line minutes. He's going to get the top power play time. If you look at his 5-year average, his .64 point per game is exactly what he's at right now. So you're not going to get a guy who's a point per game player. So if you're not in a hits and blocks league, he becomes a little bit less valuable, especially with Hughes out. But if you're in a hits and blocks league, he's still very complete, and he can act as a hits and blocks booster, but on offense. And I would expect his production to dip slightly as the week drags on and he starts to realize that he's not playing with Jack Hughes anymore, but he still has really good line mates, and I don't necessarily see the hits and blocks drying up at any point in the near future. So an excellent week for Ondrej Palat. Our second forward is Brock Boeser, 48% owned. That's a little bit high considering what he does, but he's got 21 points in 17 games when the Canucks win. Only 14 points in 28 games when they don't. So maybe they lose because he doesn't produce, or maybe they don't produce, or he doesn't produce when they lose. Whatever the case is, chicken or the egg, he's increased himself greatly since the coaching change. Since that change, 1 goal, 7 assists, 15 shots. He's a -1, but he's a 2.33 increase on the Data Draft Player Hub. He's now a 68. And just a quick reminder, if you want access to these player hubs for every player and goalie in the league, you can click on the Patreon link in the description below. It's dirt cheap, only $3 a month for access to the hubs, $5 for the hubs and the Discord group, which can potentially make or break your season, having that kind of help down the stretch and into the playoffs, especially if you're playing for money. So keep that in mind. That's in the Patreon link in the description below. But when it comes to Boeser, pretty good season, 35 points in 45 games, 10 goals, 25 assists. The -15, obviously, if you're in a plus-minus league, you're going to shy away from certain players like this who aren't particularly high-plus players. You can sometimes balance that out with a guy like Ryan Graves, who is an extremely good plus player, but nonetheless, a lot of his production comes in bunches, and you can see it down here. Most of the production since the coaching change and this past week came in this one game against the New York Islanders. A goal, 3 assists, 2 power play points, 5 shots, and 2 hits. That's an incredible game for Brock Boeser, probably his best game in a couple of years. But all of that came in one game. Now, he's still getting you hits, 2 hits per game, and that's something to keep an eye on after the coaching change because he seems to be more physically engaged, which does bode well for him responding to the message of Rick Tocchet. But if he gets traded, then maybe that all goes away. Who knows? it's, definitely his file is better now as he starts to climb into the 70 range. He's more ownable in a 12-team league. You'd like more shots and goal production out of him. You think of him and his good wrist shot, the snapshot that he has. He's only has a couple goals on the season. 10 goals in 45 games is a little bit low. That's basically less than a 20-goal pace for a guy who's known for goal scoring. And the shot volume's okay, 82nd percentile, but I'd like to see him above 3 shots per game. If I was Rick Tocchet, that's what I'd be telling him. Just shoot everything. But nonetheless, a really good week for Brock Boeser. The 8 hits was a nice little bonus on top of the 9 shots and the 5 points. Now, the last guy we're going to talk about on offense is Owen Tippett, left wing, right wing eligible. That's going to help positional flexibility, 9% owned. I've mentioned him a lot this year for his hits and blocks coverage, shot volume, and general production. The production this week, like Boeser, comes off of 1 good game against Seattle, a goal, an assist, a power play point, 2 shots, 3 hits. But what you can take away from his log is that he's getting you a minimum of 2 shots every game and about 2 hits every game. And you can see that from his hub, 1.73 hits per game, 2.56 shots per game. So that's what you're getting as a floor for Tippett. And then when he has a good game and goes off, he's still getting power play time. So he will get you some of those power play points and the offensive production will come. It's just a matter of whether Philly can score or not. Some of these games, they only scored 1 goal, 2 goals in this one, 2 goals in this one, 1 in this one, 1 in that one. So he didn't factor in at all there. When they put up a couple goals, he's factoring in on the offense. So that's a good sign if you are interested in Owen Tippett. Now, he's a fairly complete player. Point per game is a bit low. Assists are a bit low. Blocks aren't crazy high, but he's not below 64th percentile in anything. So that's why he's a 76 on the Data Draft Player Hub with hits and blocks. He's basically a good streaming option whenever Philly plays a heavy week or has a bunch of off-night games. And that's not this week. They only played twice. So this might not be the time to pick him up. But try to keep that in the back of your mind. If you're heading towards another week and Philly has a 4-game week, this is one of the guys that I'm looking at. Scott Lawton has kind of come back to earth a little bit. Konechny's pretty much owned up. You could take a little bit more of a risk with Frost or Noah Cates, but Owen Tippett has kind of shown that he's got this all year in terms of his floor with the shots and the hit volume. So excellent week for Tippett. But we are now in the period where you start to look at non-playoff teams to start heating up and screwing themselves out of Connor Bedard. And with Torts behind the bench, I would expect the Flyers to do just that. So if you're a fan of one of those teams that should be tanking for Bedard, that always pisses you off when you see them start to win and produce and they start playing like a team again. And that's going to start happening more and more as we head towards the end of the season. And that's an excellent opportunity in fantasy to get these players getting top 6 minutes and power play time on those teams that are going to try to play spoiler and screw themselves out of Connor Bedard. So keep that in the back of your mind as you head forward. But that's going to do it for the forwards this week. Let's now turn to the defensemen. Similar file in the sense that a lot of this production came in 1 game, and that was the other night against St. Louis, a 4-assist, 2 power play point game for Juuso Valimaki. 5% rostered. He was 4% rostered when I started making this video, so it's climbing slowly but surely, so get in on it while you can. With Chychrun likely traded any minute now and Gostisbehere on IR, this is an opportunity for us fantasy managers to find a power play quarterback on the waiver wire. And last game, it was Valimaki getting that opportunity, and he definitely took advantage. As you can see, he's got a 3-game point streak on top of that, though. So the production has been coming for a while. A 5-shot game, a 3-shot game, a hit here and there. The question I have is who's actually going to get this time in the long term? Because you have, earlier in the season, I would have recommended that it was J.J. Moser that was going to get that power play time. But now Valimaki is stepping up this week, and this is his file. So if you look at his Data Draft Player Hub, this production is basically all in the last week or so. And then the blocks coverage isn't great, and some of the other category coverages are really low. So he's maybe not the best option. I would typically tend to lean towards J.J. Moser, getting a little bit more power play time. He's got more power play production. He's got a higher blocks floor for you, and pretty much every other category is a little bit higher. Not a lot, 0.35 point per game compared to 0.29, but at least you're getting a little bit more out of J.J. Moser. I don't know why it says Janice up here, but I guess that's his actual name. It goes by J.J. But nonetheless, Valimaki had a great week. 6 assists in 3 games is nothing to shake a head at. So 2 power play points, 9 shots. on top of all of that. But again, 18 points in 49 games is okay. It's just not great. The -9 isn't terrible considering he's on Arizona, but nonetheless, if you're going to take a look at this being one of those teams that you can potentially get some fantasy value out of down the stretch, I would take a look at the line assignments and make sure that Valimaki is staying on that power play if you're looking to add him. If not, I would maybe go to Moser. But nonetheless, there will be opportunity with Chychrun moving out whenever that starts to filter out in terms of the details on the trade that we haven't got yet. Now, our last defenseman, this is a standard hits and blocks guy. I used him as the thumbnail for the hits and blocks video in the preseason because he does this routinely. This week, he gets some offensive production. He becomes the 8th highest defenseman in hits and blocks leagues last week. 86th percentile in hits, 98th in blocks, over 2 per game for each. So that's what you're getting out of him on a consistent basis. You can see it in his log, 4 hits, 4 hits, 4 hits. This doesn't have blocks on it for whatever reason. They stopped doing that for the logs, but nonetheless, getting some shot volume, some hits, and 2 blocks per game average. You know what you're getting with him. He's going to be a good streaming option whenever Philly has a 4-game week and you want to add some hits and blocks volume, but it's always nice to see one of those guys get rewarded offensively. So if you own him already for that, then you got rewarded last week. 2 assists, a power play point, 6 shots, 13 hits, and 7 blocks. So again, nothing crazy offensively, but in terms of the top performers of the week for defensemen this week, it was either Valimaki, who had an incredible game and a 3-game point streak, or guys like this who were getting a ton of peripheral coverage. But that's going to do it for the forwards and D. Let's move on to the goaltender, and that's an important conversation. It's Adin Hill, because Logan Thompson is week to week with a lower body injury, and that is the perfect opportunity to grab Adin Hill if he's on your wire. 45% owned, so he may not be there, but Vegas is second in the NHL in expected goals against, meaning you're getting great team exposure, and now Hill is the number 1 until they make a trade if they choose to do so. His numbers on the season are excellent: 12-5-1, 2.50 goals against, and a 9.11 save percentage in 19 starts. He's had points in the season where he's dipped a little bit in terms of his save percentage and goals against average, but he's still an elite team exposure, 94th percentile. Because Vegas is so good defensively, they're going to make sure that they protect him and insulate him. This past week, 2 wins, 3 games played. One of those was in relief when Thompson went down, where he did not give up a goal. So that would have been a shutout if he had started, but he didn't, obviously. 2 wins, 1.30 goals against, 9.35 save percentage. And again, Vegas only has 2 games this week, so this may not be the week to pick him up. If you have the opportunity to do so, I would just do it anyway because he'll get both of those starts. So if you're comparing, another type of goaltender that you could stream who's only going to get 1 or 2 starts, you're at least guaranteed 2 with Hill. Unless they go out and make a random trade at the, midweek point or whatever. But Adin Hill could be a longer-term starter option. Again, you're getting access to the guy who's in the net almost every night now for one of the best defensive teams in the league. That's something that perks my ears up. I already picked him up in my main league, so we'll take a look at it going forward. This could be a really nice value play for the next 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how long Thompson is out. Especially if you own Thompson, you definitely want to back that up with Adin Hill. Last but not least, the top risers on the Data Draft Player Hub. I featured Palat and Harvey Pinard on YouTube Fantasy File Shorts over the weekend, so you already know about them. I also featured Palat in the weekly video, and today he's a 76, and we know why. Same, Pinard is climbing up there. He had an assist after I featured him, so he's still continuing that production. If you look at Kyle Palmieri, he's been building week by week. He's now a 66 on the Player Hub with hits and blocks. He's second line with Lee and Nelson, second power play unit as well, and he's typically a guy who scores goals and gets some shot volume, so if he's going to start to play like that, then that's definitely a guy you could take a look at in deeper leagues. I own Chris Letang in a bunch of leagues now. For some reason, he hit the wire when he was injured. Now up to an 83. That's elite for defensemen in the hits and blocks Player Hub. He's up 7 points, and that's basically coming out of the passing of his father and the injuries. He's still kind of banged up a little bit, but he's very productive when he's in. So this is a guy that I picked up already in a couple leagues. If you have an opportunity to make a trade, the only thing that would scare me off is his injury history and the fact that he's still relatively banged up. Moving down the list, Frank Vetrano, I mentioned as a YouTube short as well for a fantasy file. So you probably already picked him up if you were thinking about getting that shot volume and the goal production that he was giving out. Nick Schmaltz, we featured him yesterday in the weekly video, or Saturday in the weekly video. He's a really good streaming option in Arizona. Morgan Riley's finally started to produce a little bit. Dougie Hamilton has continued to produce. He's been on fire the last couple of weeks. But most of these guys are going to be owned up, or we've talked about them. But somebody that we've talked about before, but he's pretty much still ownable, is Kirby Dach in the right corner. He's now a 70 on the Data Draft Player Hub with hits and blocks. That's really good. He's getting the top power play minutes now. He's in a top 6 role. Montreal is playing spoiler, trying to screw themselves out of Connor Bedard. So that's definitely a file to keep an eye on. If you have any roster position that you need, I believe he's center right wing eligible. So he will help you get some positional flexibility as well as some production down the stretch. And then last but not least, Nick Ritchie, bottom corner. Another Arizona guy, good player on a bad team. He's got a 4-game week this week, gets some power play time, but he was bumped to the second unit for Nick Bjugstad, which doesn't make much sense to me. But either way, he's usually a good hitter and goal scoring option, especially if he's getting power play time. But that's going to do it for this video. If you liked it, please let me know. My YouTube numbers are down drastically, 40% from just a month or two ago. So I feel like I'm being bitch slapped by the algorithm right now. So any help you can offer is greatly appreciated. Like, subscribe, notification icon, all that crap. If you like this channel and have kept it a secret from your league, but now you're cruising toward the playoffs, maybe help a brother out and share it with your league. Follow on Instagram and Twitter at @data_draft. And as always, I will see you in the next one.